Number 1. The American weekend officially begins on Friday evening, but already by Friday morning there are signs that the weekend is just around the corner. You see fewer cars on the highways, and buses and subways are less crowded with people, too. This is because some people take a day off on Friday to have a 3-day weekend. Things are also different at work. People don't wear the same clothes as they wear on weekdays. They dress themselves more casually. For instance, managers in the office may put on casual sports clothes instead of coats and ties. Some people put on blue jeans. This trend toward Easy Fridays is popular with employees who normally wear uniforms to work. In Los Angeles, for example, bus drivers are usually dressed in military-style jackets, hats, and trousers. Recently, however, they have received permission to wear polo shirts and baseball caps on Fridays. Transportation officials believe that this new Friday dress code is good for the driver's morale, and they are also sure that the passengers won't mind, just as long as the buses run on time.
Number 2. In many American families, it is common for both parents to have full-time jobs, even when they have little children. But if both mom and dad are gone all day, who on earth takes care of the kids? In quite a few homes, the nanny does. A long time ago, only rich people could afford to have a nanny. Nannies were usually middle-aged, unmarried women who were strict with the children. They insisted on their children's behaving themselves at all times. These days, however, many middle-class families have college students to work as nannies. Usually these people who take care of children are young women, but some young men do this type of work too. Often nannies live with the family, and the children grow up to love them very much. These live-in jobs appeal to college students because they don't have to spend money on rent or food. Sometimes foreign students take jobs as nannies, hoping such work will help them improve their English skills. There is one problem, though. Because they spend so much time playing and talking with little children, most of the English they learn is baby talk.
Number 3. After having lived for over 20 years in the same district, Albert was forced to move to a new place. His landlord was taken aback to hear he was leaving because he couldn't afford to buy any more chocolate. It all began a year ago. As Albert returned home one evening, he found a large dog in front of his gate. He was fond of animals, and as he happened to have a small piece of chocolate in his pocket, he gave it to the dog. The next day, the dog was there again. It held up its paw and received another piece of chocolate as a reward. Albert called his new friend Bingo. He failed to discover the dog's real name or who his owner was. However, Bingo never failed to appear regularly every afternoon, and it was very clear that he preferred chocolate to bones. Soon the dog was not satisfied with small pieces of chocolate and demanded a large bar every day. If at any time Albert neglected his duty, Bingo got very angry and didn't let him open the gate. He was now at the mercy of Bingo and had to bribe him to get into his own house. As he had to spend such a large part of his weekly wages to supply Bingo with chocolate, he moved somewhere else.
Number 4. Today, in many parts of the world, it is customary for people to shake hands on meeting as a gesture of goodwill. Originally, however, the practice of shaking hands had a more practical purpose. Shaking hands originated in medieval times. In those days, when a man came across a stranger, he would often reach for his weapon out of fear in spite of himself with his right hand, in case he had to use the weapon to defend himself. Sometimes the two men had been circling around each other with weapons in their hands until they laid aside the weapons. Then the two persons extended their right hands to show they had no weapons. It is not known when and why the handshake changed from a simple clasping of hands to include a shaking movement. This shaking movement of the clasped hands probably started as early as the 16th century.
Number 5. Today it seems that the earth is in danger, and one of the big problems is the loss of trees and forests. Trees give off oxygen, which is essential to animal life. In the past few decades, the need for wood has increased dramatically. This means that more and more trees are being cut down, and if people do not take any measures to stop it, this process will speed up in the future. In addition to the need for wood, people are clearing forests of trees for agricultural land. In some areas, the land is farmed until no crops grow well. Then the farmers move on and cut down the trees in another area to make room for more crops. This is especially true of the rainforests of Brazil and other countries. They are in the process of disappearing. It is said that an area about as large as a soccer field disappears every minute. At this rate, our forests are to disappear completely and never to grow again.
Number 6. The achievements of Benjamin Franklin are not so well known as his name, but America owes what she is to his achievements. Benjamin Franklin was born in Boston, but he made his way to Philadelphia at the age of 16. On arriving there, he walked around and looked for lodgings and work. His industry brought him success, and when he was about 40 years old, he retired to devote himself to helping the people of his colony. Soon he was engaged in everything good and useful. He organized a fire company, and he saw to it that the streets of the city were lighted and cleaned. He set up the first library, the first academy, and the first post office. He made an experiment of electricity by flying a kite in a storm. As a result, lightning proved to be electricity. He printed many newspapers, and he brought out an almanac each year. Later, Franklin went to London to represent the American colonies. Though he lived in England a long time, he was the last person to lose the American simplicity or the American point of view. When he felt that the time had come for America to break away from England and set up for herself, he took the lead in working for independence.
Number 7. When someone sees a car coming, he shouts at you, "Look out!" Hearing the shout, you jump just in time to avoid being run over by an automobile. You owe your escape to the fundamental cooperative act by which most of the higher animals survive. That is, communication by means of noises. You didn't see the car coming, but someone else caught sight of it, and he made noises to communicate his alarm to you. In other words, although your nervous system took no note of the danger, you were not injured because another nervous system took note of it. For the time being, you took advantage of someone else's nervous system in addition to your own. Indeed, we are dependent on the nervous systems of others to make up for what we have missed by ourselves without paying attention.
Number 8. Being an air stewardess is so attractive that many girls apply for the job, and they work hard so that they may be a good stewardess. The reason is that they think they can make a living and see the sights of the world at the same time. Of course, stewardesses travel a lot, but are often too tired or too busy to pay a visit to many foreign tourist spots. They are working girls, after all. But it is also true that they must be equal to a job requiring professional abilities. They also need to be calm enough to carry out the necessary procedures in case of an emergency. A passenger's life may depend on them just as well as on the pilot's, so you should not think little of their job.
Number 9. A. The British pride themselves on their sense of humor. As a matter of fact, they are gifted with it. If you suspected a British man of being without a sense of humor, he would protest strongly. Not by any means would he admit to not having a sense of humor, any more than he would ever admit to being a bad driver. B. Useful as it is, a computer is nothing more than a machine that faithfully follows our instructions. It is a big mistake, therefore, to think that a computer can make a judgment on an issue without any clear guidelines. For example, when a computer says, "Destroy your enemy," you must think twice before you take any action. In fact, a computer can never give orders, but only make suggestions. There is, however, one activity which a computer can perform much better than we can. That is memorizing. Alas, we all fall short of the simplest computer with respect to this.
Number 10. One advantage of living in Japan is that the other foreigners that one is acquainted with are more interesting for the most part than the people one meets in one's own country. Those who come here of their own accord and who live here by choice tend to be different from ordinary people. If they had been ordinary people, they would never have come to Japan. Such people, in my experience, are very interesting on the whole. They have come to Japan for various reasons, but for whatever reason, they have chosen to live in Japan. I have more friends among the foreigners in Tokyo than I would have if I were in England. This sounds like an exaggeration, but I do not think that it is. In England, I would have many friends, but I do not think I would have such close friends. My friends here include Americans, Englishmen, and people from other countries. As far as I know, these people are representative of their various societies. The interest in Japan that we have in common brings us close to each other and plays an important role in forming understanding and friendship between us.
Number 11. Earth is different from other planets because of water. Water has a tremendous effect on our planet. Nothing is as important as water to life on the Earth. But for water, life on the Earth would be impossible. Humans are composed of nearly 70% water, and we are dependent on water in many ways. We couldn't do without water even a day. However, serious water supply problems exist in regions where fresh water is in short supply, such as deserts. Even regions abundant in fresh water are not without problems, and maintaining the quality and quantity of water is very important. Worldwide, we are using more and more water, in part because our population is on the increase, and in part because on the average, each person is using more water. Especially in developing countries, the supply of water can't keep up with the demand for water. To meet the need for water, we must take whatever steps are necessary.
Number 12. I remember meeting an American by accident on a long-distance bus. He never stopped talking all the way, which annoyed me a lot. Americans, in 9 cases out of 10, are a talkative people, and it's easy to make friends with them. They feel most comfortable in putting their thoughts into spoken words. Little is left to the imagination of the listener. An American much prefers to say exactly what he has in mind. In talking with an American for the first time, you may notice that the conversation makes quick progress. It is common for travelers who have sat down beside each other to have almost finished exchanging their life stories by the time they get to their destination. If you should meet such a talkative American, you would not be so nervous. You need not think you have to answer all the questions you are asked. Just turn the conversation back to him by asking questions of your own. He will be content to talk about himself.
Number 13. For a long time, people have looked for ways to preserve food so that it could be used later. We have no idea how or when people discovered methods of food preservation. The chances are that hungry hunters ate dried berries or grapes. They took to the taste of them and took some home. Later, people learned how to dry berries and grapes by exposing them to the sun. By chance, people may have left some food in the snow. They saw that these cold or frozen foods lasted longer than fresh foods. They found out that salt prevented food from spoiling. They also came to know that cooking kept food from going bad. Later, people learned how to tame animals and to grow crops. They gave up wandering and made homes. They learned how to make cheese and butter from the milk of some animals and to make wine from the grapes they grew. They found that when wine soured, it became vinegar and could be used to preserve foods. New ways of preserving food were added to their knowledge.
Number 14. Besides the intellect, the power of concentration is a very important quality, which few people acquire except through education. It is true that it develops naturally to some extent, but people are not likely to acquire enough concentration without a long period of intellectual education. There are three qualities which distinguish perfect concentration from imperfect concentration. Perfect concentration should be intense, prolonged, and voluntary. Intensity is illustrated by the story of Archimedes. He is said to have taken no notice when the Romans came to kill him, because he was absorbed in a mathematical problem and bent on solving it. To be able to concentrate on the same thing for a long time is essential to difficult achievement. As long as the object is of great interest, this is brought about naturally. Most people can work on a mechanical puzzle for a long time, but this is not in itself very useful. To be really valuable, the concentration must also be under the control of the will. I think it is above all the control of the will that is nurtured by education.
Number 15. The Japanese often say to me, "Do you have anything that bothers you here in Japan?" To be honest, I have. It is the Japanese unconscious habit of classifying everything into ranks. Which is better, they ask, America or Japan, California oranges or mikan, and so on. People everywhere do this to some extent, but the Japanese more than others. What is the matter with these questions? Needless to say, there are times when one product is superior to another. It is possible, then, to compare two things of the same kind in price in order to judge their quality. But there is no saying whether peaches are better than apples or whether blue is better than green. A person may prefer peaches to apples, but he can't categorically say that the one is better than the other. Many a thing in life can't be categorized so simply. Take Japanese and American cultures, for example. It is foolish to say that American culture is inferior to Japanese culture. They have different histories, languages, manners, and customs. It is impossible to say that one is better than the other. When one is not aware of these differences and makes a value judgment, it gives rise to dangerous misunderstandings.
Number 16. A. All the people on the planet are dependent on each other. In other words, all of us are connected with each other in many ways, even if we are ignorant of the fact. Your actions make an impact on others, just as their actions make an impact on you. Some of the things you did today, no matter what they might be, may have badly influenced other people, although you were not conscious of it. Roughly speaking, if you took a 15-minute shower, you probably used about 105 gallons that other people in dry areas of the world need to drink. B. Generally speaking, it is no easy matter to be a giant. All kinds of problems arise that smaller animals or plants don't have to cope with. Giant animals, for example, have a problem with support. Suppose we take a racehorse and double its height, length, and breadth without making any other changes. Then we will have made a creature that could not possibly get to its feet, let alone run. The reason is that in accordance with the increase in size, its weight increases. The larger and the heavier an animal becomes, the thicker its legs need to become in proportion, simply to carry the weight. That is why the legs of an elephant are so thick.
Number 17. The question at issue as to whether to inform a patient of his having cancer shows an important cultural difference between Americans and Japanese. Americans believe in the right of the individual to know what is wrong with him so that he can make decisions for himself. Doctors, family, and friends are not allowed to deprive the individual of this right. In Japan, on the other hand, what counts for much is not the right of the patient, but the duty of the doctor and family to protect the patient from unnecessary mental suffering. Therefore, it follows that the wishes of the family take the place of those of the patient, and the doctor's will comes before the patient's right to know, and the patient's right to know is all but ignored. The patient is supposed to obey people around him.
Number 18. Every European knows that in Europe, wealth could only be acquired at the expense of other human beings. To a European, money stands for the freedom to act at will, which also means that he says, I want to have as much money as I can, and others to have as little money as possible. In the United States, wealth was also acquired by stealing, but the real victim was not other human beings, but poor Mother Earth and her creatures. The Indians were driven out, for they had never realized the potential riches of their country. Thanks to the natural resources of the country, every American, until quite recently, could look forward to making more money than his father, so that if he made less money, the fault was his. He was either lazy or foolish. What Americans think much of is a man's power to make money. And a rich American is proud of being able to make a financial contribution to a variety of things. In no society in history have rich men given away so large a part of their wealth. On the other hand, a poor American feels guilty about being poor.
Number 19. When a human infant comes into being in any community in any part of the world, it has two things in common with any other infant. First of all, newborn children are completely helpless. Apart from a powerful capacity to draw attention to their helplessness by using sound, there is nothing the newborn child can do to ensure his own survival. Without care from some other human being, be it mother or father, an infant is not liable to survive. This helplessness is characteristic of a human infant, and is in contrast with the capacity of many newborn animals to stand up within minutes of birth. They don't even have difficulty running with the herd within a few hours. Since young animals are certainly in danger, sometimes for weeks or even months after birth, compared with the human infant, they quickly develop the capacity to protect themselves. However, the human infant is in need of others for a very long time. During this long period, the human infant develops the second feature which it shares with all other human infants, the capacity to learn language. It goes without saying that language is specific to and indispensable to the human race.
Number 20. A. Clothes are always interesting to study, not only because they reveal the taste of the wearer and to some degree his character, but also because they tell us something about the period in which they were worn. Fashions change constantly, and at first sight they may seem to change at random. However, actually there is a reason for every change. It is not too much to say that clothes reflect the thoughts and habits of the time and change with them. B. We never move about a great city without noticing the large number of people who seem to have nothing urgent to do. Although most of us complain of lack of time, the streets are crowded with people who stand in line to buy what are not necessarily in need. Every day the stores are filled with women who don't seem to be in a hurry to return home. They look around from one department to another at leisure. Yet if any of these people were asked to do something they don't feel like doing, more often than not they would say that they were afraid they had no time to spare.
Number 21. I am often asked what living in Japan is like. Today, some 12 years after coming to Japan, I can say that living here is very comfortable. I feel at ease. But this was not always the case. The first time I came to Tokyo, I went through a culture shock. The reasons were very simple. I spoke no Japanese. I had no close friends. I could not cope with the cultural differences. But after taking a trip around the world in the summer, I was determined to try my best to adapt myself to living in Japan instead of giving up. And I have never regretted this decision. For today, I am as happy as ever in Japan. Now I can speak some Japanese, and I enjoy talking with some of my Japanese friends. One of my great pleasures in Tokyo is reading the Japan Times every morning over coffee, before watching the news on TV. Because it deals with a lot of international news and has fewer advertisements, I think highly of it. By comparison, most American papers make much of local news and devote most of their space to advertisements for food and clothes. And speaking of food, I prefer Japanese food to American, especially Japanese bread.
Number 22. You may well ask what the point of being educated at university is and how it differs from education received at high school. Well, I would answer that the aim of receiving education in general is to prepare for life in the world. Leaving our family, we must set off into the wide world. With a view to learning something about the world, we make a more special preparation at university than at high school. What is this special preparation? It may mean training for a particular job, but such training is not necessarily given at university. Strictly speaking, this special training is given after having graduated from university. The special training given by university is not so much a special training of skills as a special training of the mind. It enables the students to have variety in their work and interests. The knowledge provided by university should not be too broad, or else the knowledge gained there will be shallow. However, it should be comprehensive enough to enrich the mind by getting in contact with the world outside and with other minds. The purpose of this study isn't just to learn new facts, but to relate them to each other in order. We have to aim at understanding and wisdom.
Number 23. At present, in the most civilized countries, we take freedom of speech for granted. We are so accustomed to it that we look on it as a natural right. But this right has been acquired only in recent times by struggling for it at the risk of life. Human societies have been generally opposed to freedom of thought, much more to freedom of speech. The average brain is lazy by nature, and it is apt to take the way of least resistance. Ordinary men persist in beliefs which they have accepted without questioning, and they are attached to them. Instinctively, they don't approve of anything which is not familiar to them at all, because it threatens their very being.
Number 24. The world is running out of oil, and energy experts are worried about the probability that we will be faced with a serious shortage in 10 years. Not only is each individual using more oil than ever before, but the population explosion means that each year many more people will be using oil in some form or other. Until recently, we took oil for granted. It seemed it would last forever. The increase in the price of oil has brought the world to its senses. Governments are searching for other sources of energy, but so far in vain. They are considering how they can make better use of the two other major fuels, coal and natural gas, but they have found that neither can take the place of oil in their economies. In recent years, there has been a growing concern for the environment, and coal is not popular with environmentalists. Natural gas, the purest of the three fuels, is the most limited in supply. The answer would seem to lie in nuclear power stations, but their dangers are so great. It was not until recent years that the danger began to come home to people.
Number 25. When we have a holiday in prospect, we make plans in advance in order that we may know where to go and what to do and get everything ready for it. If we don't do this, the greater part of the holiday is wasted. The same holds true of our spare time. It is a good thing to make a list of books which you want to read at your convenience. You may choose books for yourself or have your friends recommend them. At any rate, make it a rule to have a few books at hand which you are anxious to read. I think those who are not in the habit of doing so lose the pleasure of reading when the spare evening or the long railway journey or the rainy day comes. The habit of planning is no less essential to the finding of real pleasure in reading than it is to the other pleasures of life, such as traveling.
Number 26. Why don't the Japanese do away with this old custom of seeing people off? To be frank, it is a great waste of time and energy, and is meaningless. Seeing off, like photography, is one of Japan's national sports. I have come to the conclusion that the Japanese are lacking in imagination and unable to put themselves into the other person's shoes. People go to seeing offs as to a party or a show, where the person being seen off is subject to endless snapshotting and present-giving. Especially when a person is traveling by air and luggage is limited to a certain weight, it is foolish to force presents on the helpless traveler who is obliged to pay extra for the excess luggage. Actually, I can't help feeling for the person being seen off, who must spend his last precious hours bowing and smiling, being photographed over and over again, and saying meaningless things. Leave-taking should be a solemn moment shared, if at all, with only one's dearest friends.
Number 27. The capacity to put up with a more or less monotonous life is one which should be acquired in childhood. Modern parents are to blame in this respect. They provide their children with too much passive enjoyment, such as shows and good things to eat, and they do not realize the importance to a child of having one day like another except for rare occasions. The pleasure of childhood should, in the main, be such as the children themselves think of and find out from their environment by virtue of some effort and inventiveness. Pleasures which are exciting and at the same time need no physical effort, such as the theater, should rarely be given. The excitement is in the nature of a drug, and more drug will come to be required, and lack of physical movement during the excitement is contrary to instinct. A child develops best when, like a young plant, he or she is quiet and calm in the same place. Too much travel, too much variety of impressions do not do good to the young. They grow up to be incapable of putting up with monotony. I do not mean that monotony has any merits of its own. I mean only that certain good things are not possible except where there is a certain degree of monotony.
Number 28. On the morning of my 14th birthday, my father held me by the shoulders, looked me in the eye, and said, "Now that you are 14, I have to tell you a secret about our family. The day we reach the age of 14 is a sad day for men in our family." He picked up his cup of coffee, walked to the window, and looked over the garden. When he turned away from the window, he looked pale as if he had something terrible to tell. "Sit down," he said. "If you are not ready for it, we can put it off." "Let me hear it now, whatever it may be," I said. I wish I were as brave as when my father told me. "Told you what?" My father didn't answer. He moved to the corner of the room, and then he spoke. "It is not until the men of our family reach the age of 14 that they are thought old enough to know a terrible fact." "Oh God," I said to myself, "we suffer from some unknown illness, or we belong to some criminal family." "Tell me," I said in a low voice. "If only I could keep this secret from you," he said. "Tell me," I cried, my control at an end. For a long moment my father waited. Then he said at last, "There is no Santa Claus."
Number 29. Some plays are so successful that they run for years on end. In a sense, this is unfortunate for the actors who are required to go on repeating the same lines day after day. It is thought that they learn their lines by heart and never forget them. Yet, this is not always the case. A famous actor once played the part of a nobleman who had been put in prison for 20 years. In the last scene, a jailer was expected to appear and hand a letter to the nobleman. As the nobleman was expected to read the letter, he always insisted that it should be written down in full. One night the jailer played a joke on him to find out if his fellow actor had managed to learn the contents of the letter by heart yet. The curtain went up on the final scene of the play, and the jailer handed the letter to him. But the letter was not written out this time. It was a blank sheet of paper. The fellow actor stared at the blank sheet of paper for a few seconds and said, "The light is dim. Read the paper for me." And he handed the sheet of paper to the jailer. Finding that he could not remember a word of the letter either, the jailer said, "The light is indeed dim. I must get my glasses." And he hurried off the stage. To the nobleman's amusement, the jailer returned soon with a pair of glasses and the usual copy of the letter.
Number 30. Spiders are our friends because they destroy so many insects, and the insects include some of the greatest enemies of the human race. Insects would make it impossible for us to live on the earth if it were not for the protection of insect-eating spiders. We owe a lot to the birds and beasts that eat insects, but all of them put together kill a bit of the number destroyed by spiders. Moreover, unlike some of the other insect eaters, spiders do no harm whatever to us. Spiders are not insects or not even related to them. One can tell the difference almost at a glance, for a spider always has 8 legs, and an insect never more than 6. How many spiders are keen on this work on our behalf? One expert on spiders made an estimate of the number of spiders in a grass field in the south of England, and he came to the conclusion that there were not less than 2,250,000 in 1 acre. That is something like no less than 6 million spiders of different kinds on a football field. Spiders are always busy killing insects. We can do nothing but make a wild guess at how many they kill, but they are, as it were, big eaters, and not content with only 3 meals a day.
これでディスク1を終わります。